Hi, and welcome to churchtherapy.com's pastor training videos. I'm Kristen, licensed mental health counselor on staff at East Coast International Church in Lynn, Massachusetts. Today I'm going to bring you part 2 of our Emotional Traps series. This is based on a book that I wrote called Emotional Traps, Finding Freedom in Everyday Life. You can find that on Amazon. And in my previous video, hopefully you've seen that, it kind of gives an overview of what I mean by emotional traps. There's 5 key areas that I've identified as really painting the bigger picture of emotional health. And those 5 areas spell out TRAPS, so it's TRAPS, and that's thinking, relationships, addictions, past, and self-care. So I went over kind of the way that you can use that with your parishioners and kind of how to think about assessing someone's emotional health. Today I want to focus on your emotional health as a pastor, because all of us have these emotional traps, these kind of blind spots or cracks in our emotional health, and it's important to take a look at ourselves just as much as we would want to assess a client or a parishioner or whatever. So it's important to just pause and take a moment for yourself. And so what we're going to do is kind of walk through each of those 5 areas, looking specifically at the strongholds or areas that pastors can struggle with. And so hopefully that can be helpful to you as you take a look at how you're doing in your own emotional health. So let's start with that first area of thinking. And again, this is self-awareness and insight, kind of a balanced view of yourself. And so there's a couple things that I think are traps for pastors specifically. One is a savior complex. A lot of pastors think they need to do it all. Maybe their congregations even support that idea and it kind of expect you to do it all. And so that can create an imbalanced view of yourself as you don't really accept or take a look at your own limitations, but you kind of take on everything, every demand that's ever placed on you. And so that can warp your view of yourself. We're going to talk about self-care later, but in terms of the way you think about yourself, certainly experiencing a calling of God on your life, is important, and sometimes we can carry that a little far. We've certainly seen that in some of the more nationally known pastors that have fallen in a sin type of situation, and there's a off-balance view of your own importance. So kind of keeping that in check is one important thing. The other thing is just your own blind spots. Sometimes as a pastor, we're used to being in charge, we're used to having authority and being a spiritual authority, a legitimate spiritual authority in someone's life. And sometimes I think that can carry a bit farther in terms of kind of feeling like you're right or you know what's best for people. And again, humility is so important in the pastor role. And but sometimes pride can sneak in there, and that's something to certainly watch out for in your own ministry. Let's move into the second area, relationships. Now this is really important for 2 aspects. One is, do you have enough relationships? Certainly being a pastor can be lonely. Maybe you have a staff, maybe you don't. But chances are that because you are running a church, your social relationships maybe don't come from the church. And sometimes because of your busy schedule, it can be hard to have other social relationships. So you really want to be asking yourself, what other social relationships do I have? Not just an accountability partner, though that's helpful, not just another pastor to collaborate with, but someone who you actually can spend time with, that you would consider a friend. Do you have friends? That's really important for anyone. But certainly the isolation of a pastor role can be something to keep an eye on. The other thing you want to consider in relationships is the priority of your family. Definitely we've moved, or I think we're moving a little bit more towards a balanced view of family and ministry, but certainly it's been the history over the past several generations at least for pastors to really put their ministry ahead of their family, and that was the expectation, that was the norm. I hope that's changing, because certainly I think there was damage that came out of that. Children who are no longer following Christ, and wives who are angry and bitter and resentful, and pastors who are really, again, isolated and lonely and don't even have their family or their marriage anymore. And so you really need to protect those things, because if you're going to be successful and in ministry, help your children to rise up in the right way and follow you, then you really need to make your family a priority. I would encourage you, if you don't already have a specific day off that you really set aside and do not do any church work on that day. That's really set aside for your family. Make sure you're getting that quality time, and then each day, make sure you have some really quality touch points. Even if it's an hour, if it's a quality hour, that can make a big difference. So that's certainly something to look at with your relationships. Now moving into the third area, addictions. This may, again, seem like, okay, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes. You might feel like you're doing okay. Pornography is a really important one to talk about here, particularly with pastors, because it's a largely group of men. This is something that definitely disrupts your ministry. And depending on the study that you look at, between 50 and 63% of pastors have said that within this week, within the week of the survey, that they struggled with looking at pornography or some other type of form of sexual addiction. So this is a real and prevalent problem. There was another study done about the Promise Keepers that had 50% of those men that were at a Promise Keepers rally said that within a week of that rally, they had looked at pornography. So this is a widespread issue, even among people who morally know that it's wrong or understand that they don't want to do that. Again, addiction is something that you don't want to do. It might be a sin area, but goes a little beyond just a sin because there's something compulsive about it. You can't stop even though you want to. And so that's something. There is definitely resources out there. There are resources for you online or certainly in your local area if you look for Christian counselors. There are some sexual addiction resources out there. And if you need help finding some of those, certainly you could email me privately and I can help direct you. You can find my email address on the website, churchtherapy.com. All right, moving into that fourth area of your past. This is something that you might feel like you don't think about your past that much. But depending on what your testimony is and what God has brought you through, you might feel like, wow, God has just delivered me from so much and He's raised me up into ministry, and that's so important. But you might not realize the impact of your past on your present. And so depending on your family relationships and how that impacted you as a child, there may still be some ways that in your present day, you're still kind of acting out those things. So you can look at your current relationships to find out how that might be affecting you, how you handle conflict, how you handle stress, what you go back to in moments of stress. These are kind of indicators of what might still be lingering from your past. So take a look at that. And then finally, our fifth area is self-care. And that's something that is incredibly hard for pastors. Again, because of the expectations of your schedule, it can be very challenging to eat right, to exercise well, to take time for yourself, again, your family, to protect those things. So I want you to just think right now, how many hours of sleep do you get a night? What kinds of food do you eat during the day? Do you have meals that are pretty healthy and that you plan, or are you grabbing fast food or a quick bite with a parishioner or something pretty regularly? When was the last time you exercised? Do you have a consistent routine with that? Those are some starting questions. Again, there's more in my book, so if you want to take a look at that, you can do this for yourself, and there's a questionnaire in the back as well to kind of help guide you through what areas you might need to look at. I hope that's been helpful. Definitely would love to have you go on my blog and check out some of my articles there. Again, it's churchtherapy.com, and thanks for watching.